Hello and welcome to Where the Bush is Burning. I'm your host, Tom Tice. Each week we gather together and have a conversation about Christ. Thank you very much for joining us. I appreciate those of you who have been watching, and I appreciate the feedback that I've received from some of you. So thank you very much for being a part of what we're doing here today at Where the Bush is Burning. We're going to have a conversation about Christ once again. It brings us to, I think, what is one of my favorite stories out of the Gospels. I've been going through the Gospels again, and as I ran across this particular account, and I want to bring it to your attention today. It is in Mark chapter 14. After 2 days, it was the Passover and the Feast of Unleavened Bread. And the chief priests and the scribes sought how they might take him by trickery and put him to death. But they said, not during the feast, lest there be an uproar of the people. And being in Bethany at the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came having an alabaster flask of very costly oil of spikenard. Then she broke the flask and poured it on his head. But there were some who were indignant among themselves and said, why was this fragrant oil wasted? For it might have been sold for more than 300 denarii and given to the poor. And they criticized her sharply. But Jesus said, let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a good work for me. For you have the poor with you always, and whenever you wish, you may do them good. But me you do not have always. She has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for the burial. Assuredly, I say to you, wherever the gospel is preached in the whole world, what this woman has done will be told as a memorial to her. Then it says, interestingly enough, that right after that, Judas, who was one of the 12, went out to the chief priests and betrayed Christ. It's a very interesting circumstance that occurs here. And it's certainly worthy of our attention. And in retelling this story and talking about it, we are, in fact, fulfilling what Christ prophesied would happen with regard to the declaration of the gospel and this woman and her deed being remembered. One of the most captivating statements which Christ makes here is, she has done what she could. We very often wonder how God, I think, views the things that we do and whether he's paying any attention whatsoever. Now, there's much of the scripture that indicates to us that God, knowing all things, sees the sparrow that falls to the ground, and we cite that verse, and we talk about these things from time to time. In this particular context, there are some interesting things about what this woman did, and more than that, not just what she did, but how Christ viewed it. And that's where I want us to concentrate in our conversation about Christ this morning. In this particular situation, Christ was coming to the end of his public ministry. He had been in Jerusalem. He was about to be crucified. Shortly after this, he would be arrested in the Garden of Gethsemane. He would be put through the mockery of the trials that he endured. He would be beaten, ultimately, then crucified. So that's all coming up very, very quickly. This is the Feast of the Passover. He was crucified during the Passover. So this is at the last end of his public ministry. And he's in the house of Simon the leper in Bethany, which is outside of Jerusalem. This woman comes in. Now she has this alabaster box, which is full of this expensive ointment. 300 denarii nominally is about a year's wages. Apparently the people who were working at the time, laboring people, were paid a penny a day or denarii a day. And then this would have represented 300 denarii. So almost a year's worth of wages. And so she took this box and she broke it and she poured it, according to the passage, on his head. So when she poured it on his head, and then There are other accounts of how this happened, that she was weeping, that she wiped his feet with her hair, that she lavished this a very, very expensive gift upon him. And as is true very often of people when they are doing something out of love for Christ, they rarely, if ever, want for critics. There's always someone standing off in the peanut gallery carping, and there's someone who has some statement to make about what they're doing and how it could be done differently, or how it could have been done better, or something else which should have been done. If you are seeking to honor Christ, you are never going to want for criticism from some people. In this particular case, apparently, although this passage doesn't indicate it, it was some of the disciples, and that even those who were there, other people, were somewhat critical of what she did. By contrast to them, you see how Christ treats her and what Christ does. When they criticize her, they say, well, this is 300 denarii. It could have been sold. It could have been given to the poor. And Christ says to them to basically leave her alone. He says, let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has done a good work for me. Says they had criticized her sharply. And he responds and says, she has done a good work for me. You have the poor with you always, and whenever you wish, you may do them good. But me you do not have always. She has done what she could. She has come beforehand to anoint my body for burial. So Christ's eyes were toward the cross. He knew how this was going to turn out. He knew that he was going to be arrested shortly. He knew he was going to be beaten to the extent that he was not going to be recognizable as a human being. He understood that he was going to endure the cross and that he was going to die this horrible, agonizing death. So he says about her, she's done what she could. She has anointed my body before the burial. So she's wrought a good work on me. Now, that's important because what it means to us is that Christ takes note, appreciates, and values works of love that are done for him. Now, to the disciples or to those who were criticizing her at the time, they were, first of all, very immature spiritually. And you have to realize that at this stage of their experience, they were particularly still very, very immature and demonstrated spiritual immaturity in a number of different ways. If you carry it to its logical conclusion, someone like Judas would have criticized her because he was a thief, he was the treasurer, he was apparently taking money out of the common purse, so there were other things going on there. But as far as Christ was concerned, he, first of all, stood up for the woman, defended her, told others who were there to leave her alone, said that she had done a good work, and then in many respects sets his imprimatur on what she does by saying she's done what she could. And so Christ sets high value on acts of love that are done purely out of love for him. This woman was not gaining anything by this. She had apparently some history with him in the sense that she would have known who he was. Perhaps he had healed one of her relatives or raised someone from the dead that she loved. There are a number of possibilities as to the identity of the woman, and also what kind of history she had with him as far as why she would have made this great sacrifice of almost a year's wages and simply poured it out in this act of devotion on his head. So, having said that, what we want to draw out of this is that other people may criticize us for what we are doing out of love for Christ. Christ himself does not criticize those who extravagantly give of themselves with the intent and purpose of doing things for his honor and for his glory. And so therefore, in this particular case, he defends her against her critics. He honors her, and he goes beyond that in many respects, because what he does is he says, wherever the gospel is ever going to be preached, this act that this woman has done is going to be told as a memorial or as a tribute, as an honor to her. So, having said that, just the mere fact that today we are discussing this particular incident, we are in a de facto way actually fulfilling the prophecy of Christ that wherever the gospel was declared, this would be told as a memorial to this woman. So we are fulfilling that prophecy at this very moment. Christ sets high value on acts of love that are done for him. Now, there's a lot of people, certainly, and the scripture talks about this, who do a lot of things in the name of Christ. There are those who say to Christ at the last judgment, we prophesied in your name we cast out demons, in your name we did many wonderful works. To some of those people, Christ says, depart from me, I never knew you. So not everyone who is doing things in the name of Christ is necessarily always doing those things out of pure love for Christ. There are a lot of what we would call religious grifters, or there are people who are making money off religion or using religion for their own personal advantage. And those people are out there without question, and we all have encountered them, I think, probably on one occasion or another. This woman was doing what she did out of pure love for Christ. Christ noted it. Christ honored it and honored her and her motives and her deeds, and defended her against those who would have criticized her, because she was doing what she could for Christ out of pure love for him. And of course, God knows our hearts. God knows our motives. God knows why we do what we do. And so he is able to discern, certainly, whether what we're doing is out of pure motive or whether it's out of some corrupted motive or self-serving purpose or whatever. He certainly, being God, knows all things, and he knows what our heart intent is when we do something for him. In this case, this woman, with purity of heart, made a great sacrifice, expended this extravagant gift on him, and did it out of sheer love for him. And Christ highly regarded it and set it up in many respects as an everlasting memorial, that wherever the gospel would be preached, people would hear about this woman. So today, and I would say this to you, whoever you are, you say, well, I love Christ. I want to glorify him. I want to do what I can do to point others to Christ. I desire to glorify him in thought and in word and in deed. And you're not doing it with the intention that people will notice you. You're not doing it with the intention that people will magnify you or think that you're a great person or think that you are exceptional in any way. You do it simply because you love Christ. And the reason I say this to you today is that I want you to be encouraged. I want you to be uplifted. I want you to understand how Christ views the acts of love that we perpetrate on his behalf, that we do for him, not for self-gain, not for self-aggrandizement, not that we will be seen of men, but that others will see Christ. They will magnify him and glorify him, and we do what we do out of love for him. So Christ takes note of that. Christ answers our critics. We don't feel or shouldn't feel that we have to answer the critics. Christ answers the critics for us. He answered the critics for this woman in this particular instance. And so therefore today, when we do things out of sheer love for Christ, we can be assured in our own heart, based on this circumstance, that Christ does take note of it, that he does appreciate it, that he does value what we do for him out of love for him, and that he appreciates us and honors us according to the manner in which he chooses in the manner in which suits him best. So today, if you are working away in the background and you're not doing anything out in public, and you say, well, this is what I'm doing, and what I'm doing out of love for Christ, I'm doing it for his honor, for his glory, for him. It may be something very, very obscure, something no one really will ever notice. Or it may be something that you're doing and other people, religious people, maybe they're criticizing what you're doing. Well, just continue on. Understand Christ sees. If he is God, and we believe that he is, being God, he knows all things. If he sees the sparrow, then he sees you. And he sees what your acts of love for him are, takes note of it, and honors you in the manner in which glorifies and magnifies him most. And so you should not feel that you're wasting your time. You should not feel that under any circumstances you should discontinue what you're doing out of love for Christ. What you do as unto the Lord, and he takes note of that. And so therefore be encouraged in that today, knowing that he honored this woman and declared she has done what she could. You continue on to do what you can, and Christ will take note of that, will honor that according to his will and in the manner in which glorifies him most. And you can be encouraged today that what you are doing for the glory of God and out of sheer love for Christ. So never mind the critics, just continue on and be encouraged that Christ does take note of this. That's our conversation about Christ today. I trust that you found it useful. If you have, please like and subscribe. We would appreciate that entirely. If you would like our devotional, which is called Where the Bush is Burning, comes out every day on hopeharbor.church. hopeharbor.church. Once a week, we put up an audio message from Hope Harbor, and you're welcome to listen to that. If you want to subscribe to the devotional through Substack, it is listed as Where the Bush is Burning there, and you're entirely welcome to do that as well. So certainly continue to listen, continue to participate with us here in our conversations about Christ. Once again, I'm your host, Tom Tice. All being well, next week we will return to consider Christ again in some other aspect. Thank you very much. Please join us again here at Where the Bush is Burning.